My name is Tom, and I'm an alcoholic. In an effort to improve outreach to members in the armed services who may be struggling with an alcohol problem, we're collecting interviews from current AA members serving in the U.S. and Canadian Armed Forces to share the experience and strength and hope they have found in Alcoholics Anonymous.
I'm Sam. I'm an alcoholic, and I'm a lieutenant in the United States Navy. I have been in the Navy for 4 years, and I've been a member of Alcoholics Anonymous since June 13th, 2016. I started drinking around 15 at the abandoned gas station next to my parents' house. And, it wasn't something that I wanted every single day, but I was drinking a lot on the weekends with my friends and hanging out with people that I shouldn't have been hanging out with. And I come from an alcoholic family. Both my parents are alcoholics, and my mom identifies as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. So growing up in a sober household was very unique also. So I kind of knew a little bit about alcoholism before I even picked up. I was progressively getting worse with my drinking. I had wrecked several cars. I had flipped a car and fell asleep at the wheel. I had gotten in a BMX accident. I was pulled over when I was 17. And I started drinking when I was 15. So for 2 years, I had been drinking, and I hadn't at that point started to control it, but I had been pulled over for a DUI. And the cop said, either we'll call your mom or we'll take you to jail. And I was like, take me to jail. Like, do not call her. She was a single mother in AA. I was afraid of the consequences. Um, and part of, getting in trouble was going to AA. So I went to my first meeting at 17 to a young people's group. And I had this idea of what AA was going to be like when I got in there, and it was not that way. And after I left that young people's meeting, they said, do you want to go bowling? Do you want to go to Starbucks? Do you want to do sober things? And after that, I did try and control my drinking a little bit. I was noticing that maybe it's a problem. And I wasn't the only one telling myself that. My mom had told me that, my dad, a bunch of my friends, other family members. So throughout that time, and even in my 20s, I would have like a beer or half of a solo cup. But I was so mindful of the unmanageability when I could only have one. Like, all I could think about was, I wish I could have another. I wish I could have another. And it was so hard to control it. And I wouldn't have alcohol in my house when I moved to Philly. I just would try to stay away from it as much as possible, but that mental obsession just kept coming and coming. So it was really hard for me to control it. And there were times where I would go, a couple of days or weeks without drinking, and I was really proud of myself, but I would just get right back on the wagon again. I was coming to a point where I had tried everything. I had bought the Pima Chodron meditation books. I was writing intentions every morning to not drink. I even had a day count. I'd write in my journal like day 5, and then I would disappear for days and I would come back, and it's like, I did it again. But the weekend before I got sober, I went to a music festival with my sister, and I was really trying to rebuild a relationship. And I promised her I wouldn't get drunk, because the year before I did, and I blacked out and disappeared because that's what I would usually do. And I did the same exact thing that weekend. And everything that I had promised her just smacked me in the face. And I just had this almost God consciousness that said, what are you doing? Like, everything that you love is falling apart. So on the drive home from that music festival, I called a girlfriend of mine who had 30 days sober, and 30 days seemed like a lot of time to me, like amazing amount of time. I couldn't even get 5 days, let alone a day. So I called her, and she took me to my first meeting, and that it was really not the worst bottom that I had ever had, but I had just had enough. And I did voluntarily decide to go to AA. I had options. I could have gone to rehab, but I just knew AA was there from my own family history. So yeah, and I'm glad I walked through the door.
Thank you. Have you had any fear about hurting your military career, security clearance, or anything since you're in Alcoholics Anonymous?
I absolutely have. Again, I joined when I was 2 years sober. So when I went to MEPS, I remember talking to my sponsor and she said, you just have to be honest with them about everything you did. And when I got there, how old was I? 29. And I was, of course, the oldest person at MEPS at that time. Everyone was like 18 waiting to join. And I had met with the doctor and she said, have you ever had a drinking problem? Have you used drugs, etc.? And I told her the truth. And I was really worried at that point that it was over. Like it was done for me because I was honest with her. And she kind of looked at me stunned, like, okay, and just moved on. Like it wasn't as big of a deal as I thought it would be. And my recruiter, even though I was an officer, and I know they say this to enlisted too, but he said, lie, like just don't tell them anything. I just felt like I couldn't do that as a member of AA, trying to live a sober life and an honest life. And now that I've been in for 4 years, there are times where I have patients, because I'm in the medical service corps, that also have alcohol problems. And I really have to find a boundary between my own AA, my own program, my own sobriety, and helping them. For me, I have told some of my coworkers that I'm in the program, and it hasn't been a big deal. You know, it hasn't shown up on my eval that Sam is an alcoholic. Like it doesn't matter. What matters is how I show up in my job. And I think AA has really showed me how to just be a worker among workers and to not let all of that fear that I had about being found out really get in the way of that, because it doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Have you been stationed overseas or deployed while being sober? And if so, how have you worked your program in those environments?
I have not specifically been overseas or deployed, but I did do a short stint TAD on a carrier. And while I was on the carrier, I thought about, how can I go to meetings? What am I going to do? What do they have there? I don't know. So in preparation for that, I packed my As Bill Sees It, and I packed my readings so I would have that with me on the ship. And ironically, in conversation with the chaplain, I said to him, and he was a commander, I said, are there any friends of Bill on the ship? And he was like, in fact, there are. And there were 2 meetings on the carrier. And if I hadn't said anything, I wouldn't have known. So that showed me that if I can, just show up again and put my ego aside and my pride aside and really continue to put my sobriety first, I'll find things that I didn't know existed, which is pretty cool.
Is there anything else you'd like to share or say to a service member struggling with an alcohol problem who's listening to this right now?
I would say you're not alone. There's so many service members that we don't even know that are in AA because of that anonymity. And I know from personal experience in working with service members, if people seek help when they think they need it, they will get that support. Instead of waiting until they get an ARI and they have to go to DRB or Captain's Mast, if you feel like you need help, your career doesn't matter, you matter. Your alcoholism matters, your treatment matters. That's what I would say. And there's so many people that I think their career comes first and they're so worried about it, but they're a human at the end of the day, and they really need to get that help, and they deserve to get that help too. And no one's going to know, like I just shared, in some of those questions. You're not going to walk into the room and see your CO. And if you do, it's Jim, it's just Jim at the end of the day. Like it's not Sir. You're in the room for your own recovery. So that's what I would say to them if they were questioning it or struggling.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for sharing your experience, strength, and hope with us today.
The views and opinions expressed during this podcast are those of the individuals. No one person speaks for AA as a whole. For more information about AA, please visit our website at aa.org. To find a meeting near you or a meeting online, download the Meeting Guide app on your mobile device.